Virgo, God didn't remove this person from your life without a reason. The truth you need to hear. Someone left your life, and to this day you don't understand why. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't obvious betrayal. It was a silence that grew slowly, until one day that person was simply no longer there. What if I told you that this wasn't by chance? Virgos have a characteristic that few realize. You analyze every detail, every word, every gesture, except the only thing that truly mattered at that moment. The spiritual reason behind the absence. You thought you lost someone, but perhaps you were protected from someone. There's a difference between what the eyes see and what the soul feels when someone leaves you for a purpose that hasn't yet been revealed. God doesn't remove people from your life by accident. He removes what cannot continue with you to the next chapter. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what this absence was trying to teach you, something that only those born under the sign of Virgo can feel before understanding. There's a specific kind of pain that only Virgos truly understand, the pain of picking up the pieces of a relationship alone. A relationship you never made sense to explain to others. You try to recount what happened, but the words come out too small, unable to carry the weight of what you felt inside, because the truth is, it wasn't just one person who left. It was a version of yourself that went with them. You've spent months, maybe years, trying to understand where you went wrong. You've reviewed old conversations. You've analyzed every message, every silence, every change in tone in the voice of someone who once seemed so present. That's your way of processing the world, dissecting, examining, searching for the piece that doesn't fit. But what if the problem was never finding the mistake? What if this tireless search is actually a way of avoiding accepting something bigger? There's a part of Virgo that clings to control, because control seems like the only way to feel safe. If I understand what happened, I can prevent it from happening again. If I find the flaw, I can fix it. But some exits aren't flaws to fix. They're doors that close, because a higher power already knew what was coming next. Think about the last time someone walked away from you without a fully meaningful explanation. You probably tried to piece together the facts like a puzzle. You gathered clues, you formed theories, you got close to an answer, but never close enough for the pain to stop. And while you were doing that, you may have forgotten to ask yourself the question that really matters. Why did that person need to leave, so that something within you could be born? This isn't about minimizing what you felt. The pain was real. The nights you spent reviewing every detail until you couldn't think anymore were real too. But there's a difference between experiencing the pain and getting stuck in it, trying to understand with your mind what only time and faith can explain. Virgo has a complicated relationship with what it cannot control. You prefer certainty, even when certainty hurts, to the uncertainty that demands faith. And that's exactly where the most silent and powerful pattern of your sign lies. The resistance to accepting that some removals don't ask for your permission, nor your full understanding, nor your immediate forgiveness. They only ask that you continue. There's a question lurking beneath all this relentless analysis, and perhaps you've never dared to ask it aloud. What if this person left because I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet before the next chapter begins? What if their absence wasn't punishment, but preparation? You know that feeling of looking back and realizing that certain people only existed in your life to teach you a specific lesson, and after it was taught, they were gone, almost as if their purpose had expired. This happens more often than you might imagine. And with Virgo, this pattern is even more evident because your sign carries a rare sensitivity to perceive when something has changed frequency, even before you can name what changed. There's something inside you that always knew that person wasn't going to stay until the end. Maybe you ignored that sign because it hurt too much to hear it. Maybe you kept trying to make something work that was already being silently dismantled by a force you couldn't see. What if I told you that removing that person wasn't about them, but about the space that needed to open up within you? There's an unseen part of the story, busy trying to understand the past without seeing what had already been prepared, now prepared to reveal what your eyes couldn't yet see. Perhaps you've never asked yourself this aloud, but now that question won't leave your mind. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe That Help This Zodiac Sign Overcome Spiritual Envy. Doesn't talk about random removals or coincidences. It talks about the ability that Virgo possesses, and which few truly develop, to see beyond the surface of events and recognize when something has been removed from the path to make room for what is yet to come. It's not a manual of ready-made formulas. It's a deeper way of thinking, the same way you already use to analyze everything around you, but now applied to what really matters, understanding the purpose behind losses that seemed meaningless. Right now, you're reliving faces, revisiting farewells, feeling again that tightness in your chest, the feeling of someone who hasn't yet closed this chapter internally. This lingering discomfort is a sign that there's something more to understand now, while the memory is still vivid and the lesson can still be learned. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. Now tell me in the comments, is there someone who left your life and looking back now, you feel that perhaps they were removed to protect you from something you didn't even know you needed protection from? Think of a plant that you take out of a pot that's too small. It doesn't leave because it wants to get away from the soil that nourished it. It leaves because the roots no longer fit there, and if it remains trapped in that space, it stops growing. That's how it was with that person. It wasn't rejection, it was a pot that was too small for what was coming. Virgos often confuse care with control. You think that if you take enough care, anticipate every need, and adjust every detail, you can hold back what was already destined to transform. But there's a difference between caring for something and preventing it from following its own course. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can offer a relationship is to stop trying to control it, even when it means watching it slip away. There's a recurring pattern in the life of almost every Virgo. You hold on to loose ends that should have been let go of a long time ago, because letting go feels like failure, and you've been taught without realizing it that failure is what happens when someone gives up too soon. But there's a huge difference between giving up and recognizing that that cycle has already served its purpose. Imagine a bonfire that needs to be rekindled. Before it can be lit again, someone needs to clear away the old ashes. If new wood is added on top of what has already burned, the fire suffocates before it can grow. Each person God removes from your path is, in a way, the clearing away of those ashes. It hurts because the heat of that old fire is still on your skin, but without that cleared space, the next fire would never have anywhere to be born. You've probably noticed how certain goodbyes came with signs you only understood later. An out-of-place comment, a subtle change in behavior, a feeling in your stomach that you called insecurity, but which was actually intuition trying to warn you of something your mind couldn't yet name. Virgos have this silent gift of perceiving before understanding, and that's precisely why, when the departure finally happens, a part of you already knew. There's an image that helps to better understand this process. Think of a caterpillar that no longer fits inside its own cocoon. It doesn't break that structure because it wants to destroy what protected it. It breaks because remaining there would mean never becoming what it was destined to be. The discomfort it feels before breaking free isn't a sign that something went wrong. It's a sign that the transformation has already begun inside, even before it appears on the outside. It's similar with people. Some relationships are the right cocoon for a phase, and they remain beautiful, safe, and necessary until the moment when that same space that once protected begins to feel tight. And nobody, Neither you nor the other person usually notices this tightness in time to prevent the rupture. Only later, looking from the outside, does the logic appear. That rupture didn't interrupt your growth. It was growth itself happening. There is also a difference between an absence that empties and an absence that liberates, even though both hurt equally at the beginning. The absence that empties takes something from you and gives nothing back in return, leaving a hole that is never filled. The absence that liberates, however, seems equally painful when it happens, but over time reveals a space where something new can grow, something that wouldn't have a place if the old structure continued to occupy all the ground. The question remains, how do you know in the midst of pain which of the two you are experiencing? The answer, almost always, only appears later, when time has already done its silent work. Now imagine this. What if the person who left hadn't truly gone away, but simply changed their role in your story? Some people enter your life as main characters and then become just memories that shaped you. This doesn't diminish who they were. It only changes the role they continue to play, now from the outside, still influencing who you are becoming. There's a specific type of grief that no one teaches you to name. Grief for someone who is still alive, but who is no longer part of your daily life. There's no funeral for this kind of loss. There's no specific moment on the calendar when everyone understands your suffering. You simply carry this absence in silence, between one task and another, between one meeting and another, pretending to the world that everything is fine, because that's another characteristic of Virgo. The ability to keep functioning even when something is slowly crumbling inside. But pretending everything is fine for too long has a price. And that price usually appears later, disguised as tiredness, irritation for no apparent reason, a sudden desire to isolate yourself from everything and everyone. There's a recurring scene. You look at an old photo or listen to a song that reminds you of someone, and for a second, your chest tightens. This isn't weakness. It's proof that you truly loved, and Virgos love in a way that's rarely seen from the outside because it happens in the details, in small gestures, in silent ways of caring that no one notices until they're no longer there to be perceived. Imagine a river that needs to go around a large rock in the middle of its path. The water doesn't stop. It doesn't insist on forcing its way through the rock. It simply changes direction, finds another path, and continues flowing until it reaches its destination. The rock didn't defeat the river. It only changed the way the river moved forward. Each person who is no longer part of your journey was, in a way, a rock that made you deviate. Find a path you might never have discovered if you had insisted on crossing straight ahead. And the river, you see, never holds a grudge against the rock. It just keeps going. But to truly love also means accepting that not all love is meant to last forever in the same way. Some loves change form. They cease to be a physical presence and become an invisible foundation. And it is precisely this painful and silent transition that most people never learn to navigate peacefully. There's a huge difference between a house that collapses because its foundation was weak and a house that is deliberately demolished to make way for a larger construction. From the outside, the two scenes look the same: rubble, dust, an empty space where something whole once stood. But the meaning is completely different. One is ruin. The other is preparation, and the only way to know which one you are experiencing is to observe what is born afterward, not what was lost before. Recognizing this transition without getting lost in it is one of the hardest lessons there is, and this is where many people get stuck, repeating the same cycle of attachment with different people. Recognizing this pattern in yourself is the first step. And that's exactly what one of the most important chapters of the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe, that help the zodiac sign overcome spiritual envy, is about. Teaching you to differentiate attachment from true connection. It shows you how Virgo can transform the need for control into real trust without losing the depth that makes their way of loving so rare. Copies are selling out fast, and the content may be removed at any time. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is one last layer to this story, the hardest to accept of all. What if, deep down, you already knew the answer all along? There's an old key that many people keep in a drawer even after moving house. It no longer opens any doors, but there's an attachment to holding on to it, as if throwing it away would erase what it once represented. Some people are exactly that key. They opened an important door at one point in their lives, but the house changed, the locks changed, and continuing to hold on to that key only takes up space that could be used to store the new keys, the ones that truly unlock what comes next. Letting go isn't forgetting what that key once opened. It's simply accepting that it has already fulfilled its purpose. Virgos have a habit of asking outside themselves what they already know inside. You seek confirmation, you look for signs, you look for other people to validate what your intuition has been whispering for a long time. But the truth about that person who left, about the real reason for that absence, probably already lives inside you, waiting for you to stop looking for answers outside and start listening to the silence that already knows. God doesn't take anyone from your life without a purpose. Every absence carries a message that only makes sense later, when you're no longer in the midst of the pain, but looking at it from a distance that brings clarity. And perhaps that's the real reason why everything happened the way it did, so that you could get to this point, finally understanding that no removal was greater than the care that existed behind it. This understanding, when it finally arrives, changes everything, not because it erases the pain, but because it gives it new meaning. And it is precisely this kind of profound understanding that the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe, that help the zodiac sign overcome spiritual envy, helps to consolidate within you, transforming each loss into a stepping stone and not into an open wound forever. It's the difference between carrying the past as a burden or carrying the past as a root. Availability is limited and may be taken down without notice. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. In the end, perhaps the question should never have been why that person left. Perhaps the right question has always been, what are you becoming now that they're gone? There is a silent beauty in observing a garden after winter. Before spring arrives, everything seems dead, dry, forgotten. No one looking at that garden in silence would guess that beneath the earth, entire roots were reorganizing themselves, strengthening, preparing for a blossoming that no one yet saw. Virgo carries this same wisdom of the earth, the patience to blossom from within before showing anything on the outside. And perhaps that is precisely why its most important transformations never happened in noisy moments, but in the silences that followed them. Virgo carries a silent strength, almost invisible to the eyes of those who don't pay attention, but absolutely real to those who observe closely. It is the strength to rebuild without fanfare, to flourish without needing to announce it, to transform each absence into depth instead of bitterness. God doesn't remove people from your life to punish you. He removes them to make room for what only fits in those who are no longer bound to what needed to leave. Perhaps you still feel longing. Perhaps there are still nights when that person's name appears unannounced, bringing with it a pang that time hasn't completely erased. This doesn't mean you haven't moved on. It simply means you loved in a rare way, the way only Virgos know how to love, with attention, with care, with a silent surrender that few have truly recognized. And it is precisely this capacity to love deeply, even knowing that not everything lasts, that makes your story so beautiful to observe from the outside. If there's one thing time teaches, it's that no pain stays the same size forever. It changes shape, settles in another place within you, until one day, without warning, you realize you can think about that person without feeling the same tightness in your chest as before. That's not forgetting, it's healing. And scars, contrary to what many people think, are not signs of weakness. They are silent proof that you've overcome something and remained standing. And if you've made it this far, perhaps it's because, without realizing it, you've already begun to become this new version of yourself, more whole, more at peace, but ready for what's yet to come. The absence that once hurt so much may have been, all along, the first step in a story whose outcome you can't even imagine yet.